I'm Chloe, 18 female, and for my high school graduation, my brother got a car and a celebration, while I got a mop and a lecture about responsibility. The scent of stale pizza and lukewarm soda hung in the air, a sad excuse for the aroma of celebration. Our living room, which had been transformed into a palace of streamers and balloons for my brother Leo's graduation party 2 years ago, was depressingly normal. A few deflated-looking balloons were taped to the wall, a congratulations banner hung crookedly over the doorway, and the dining table was laden with a few boxes of takeout. This was it. This was my party. My father, Mark, was already retreating to his office, a murmured "good job, sweetie" thrown over his shoulder like a discarded napkin. My mother, Helen, was bustling around, collecting paper plates with a put-upon sigh, while my brother, Leo, was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone, completely oblivious. He hadn't said more than 10 words to me all evening. "Well, Chloe, it's time for your gift," Mom announced, her voice filled with a forced brightness that set my teeth on edge. She disappeared into the laundry room and returned moments later, holding a long, thin object wrapped in festive paper. Beside it, she placed a heavy-duty plastic bucket filled with an assortment of bottles and brushes. I stared at the offering. It was a bizarre sight. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Go on, open it," she urged, beaming as if she were presenting me with the keys to a kingdom. My fingers fumbled with the paper, peeling it back to reveal a sleek, gray and blue mop. It was one of those fancy, expensive ones with a built-in sprayer and a microfiber head. Inside the bucket were bottles of floor cleaner, tile scrub, and wood polish. My graduation gift was a complete set of cleaning supplies. I looked from the mop to my mother's smiling face, my mind struggling to process the scene. A heavy silence fell over the room. Leo finally looked up from his phone, a smirk playing on his lips. "It's a metaphor, Chloe," Mom said, placing her hands on my shoulders. Her expression turned serious, her voice dropping into the familiar tone of a lecture. "Leo needed a car to get to his classes and his job. He needed that push to get out into the world. But you," she squeezed my shoulders, "you're different. You're the responsible one. You've always been so mature. Your gift isn't just a mop. It's the lesson of responsibility. Taking care of a home, contributing to the family. That is the foundation of a successful adult life. This will teach you what really matters." The words echoed in the quiet room, each one a tiny, sharp stone hitting my heart. This will teach you responsibility. As if I hadn't been the most responsible person in this house for the last 10 years. As if my entire existence wasn't already defined by responsibility. My mind flashed back to 2 years ago. For Leo's 18th birthday and graduation, the house had been packed with his friends. A catered barbecue sizzled in the backyard, and a mountain of gifts sat on the same table that now held my mop. The grand finale was Mom and Dad leading a blindfolded Leo out to the driveway, where a brand-new, cherry-red sedan sat waiting, a giant bow on its hood. Leo had whooped with joy, hugging them as tears streamed down his face. His grades had been average at best, and he drifted through high school with minimal effort, yet he was celebrated like a conquering hero. The car, my parents explained to anyone who would listen, was to give him the tools to succeed in college. My own academic career had been the polar opposite. I'd spent countless nights studying, joined the debate team, volunteered at the local library, and clawed my way to the top of my class. I was the valedictorian of my graduating class, a fact my parents had acknowledged with a brief, "Oh, that's nice, honey," before asking me if I had remembered to take out the recycling. When Leo got a C on a calculus exam, he was praised for his amazing effort and taken out for ice cream. When I brought home a report card with straight A's, my mother would scan it and say, "Good, that's what we expect from you, Chloe." My success was never a reason for celebration. It was simply the baseline expectation. I remembered the time I had saved up for months to go on a school trip to Washington, D.C. the week before we were set to leave. Leo announced that he had forgotten about a massive history project that was due on Monday. It was worth half his grade. My mother had looked at me with pleading eyes. "Chloe, you're so good at history," she'd said. "He needs your help. You understand?" I ended up spending my entire weekend in the library, essentially doing the project for him. I was so exhausted that I came down with a fever and had to miss the trip. My non-refundable deposit was lost. Leo got a B+ on the project and was rewarded with a new video game console. I got a P. Add on the back for being such a good sister. Now, standing in the living room with a mop in my hand, all those moments, all the quiet sacrifices, the overlooked achievements, and the blatant favoritism, coalesced into a single, crushing weight. My mother's lecture wasn't about teaching me responsibility. It was about cementing my role. I wasn't the daughter to be launched into the world with support and celebration. I was the unpaid, unacknowledged housekeeper, the live-in manager of domestic affairs. The reliable, sturdy foundation upon which my brother's celebrated life was being built. Leo snickered from the couch. "Looks like you know what you'll be doing this summer," he said, his eyes already back on his phone. My mother patted my shoulder again. "We're so proud of the responsible young woman you've become," she said, completely misreading my stunned silence as acceptance. "Now, why don't you get started? The kitchen floor is looking a bit sticky." I looked at the mop. I looked at my smirking brother and my beaming mother. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even disappointment. It was just a profound, hollow emptiness. The final piece of a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was solving had just clicked into place, and the full picture was devastatingly clear. They didn't see me. They had never seen me. They only saw a function, a role, a tool as useful and as unglamorous as the mop in my hand. And in that moment of absolute clarity, a quiet resolve settled over me. They were right. It was time for a lesson in responsibility. My own. "Thank you," I said, my voice strangely calm and even. The words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. I picked up the mop and the bucket. "I think I'll take these to my room." My mother's smile widened. "Of course, dear. Find a good spot for them." She probably imagined I was going to lovingly place them in a corner, ready for my new life of domestic duty. She turned away, satisfied, and started clearing the last of the pizza boxes. I walked past my father's office, from which the muffled sounds of a work call could be heard, and climbed the stairs. My bedroom was my sanctuary, the one place where I was surrounded by my own achievements. Bookshelves overflowed with novels and textbooks. A corkboard was covered in academic awards and photos from my time on the debate team, and on my desk, a stack of crisp, white envelopes lay hidden beneath a textbook. I set the mop and bucket down just inside the door. They looked absurd next to my desk, a symbol of my family's expectations clashing with the reality of my ambitions. For a long moment, I just stared at them. I touched the cool plastic of the mop handle. This was my prize. This was the culmination of 18 years of being Chloe. A wave of something cold and sharp finally pierced the numbness. It wasn't anger. It was a kind of grief. I was mourning the relationship I thought I had with my parents. I was mourning the idea that their love was unconditional. It was. Their love was transactional, and I had just been handed the invoice for my keep. My movements became slow and deliberate. I wasn't acting on an impulse. I was executing a decision that had been forming in the background of my mind for years. Every time Leo's failures were excused, every time my successes were ignored, a small brick had been laid in the foundation of this moment. The mop was not the cause. It was simply the final, insulting brick. I pulled my largest duffel bag from the back of my closet. The silence of the house was punctuated by the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the distant sound of Leo's phone playing a video. It was all so normal, so mundane, which made what I was doing feel surreal. I started packing. I didn't grab things randomly. I packed with the same methodical precision I used to study for a final exam. I laid out 3 sets of clothes. I packed my toiletries. I took the small box from my dresser drawer that contained my most important documents: my birth certificate, my social security card, my passport. I took the bank book for the small savings account I had meticulously built up from my part-time job at the library, a job my parents thought was just a nice little hobby. Then I turned to my desk. I gently lifted the psychology textbook and pulled out the stack of envelopes. The top one was from a prestigious university 5 states away. It was a letter of acceptance, and tucked inside it was another letter, this one confirming I had been awarded a full 4-year academic scholarship. I had been their top applicant. I had told no one. I knew, instinctively, that sharing this news would not be met with the joy and pride I craved. It would be met with complications. That's so far away, Chloe. What about helping out at home? Are you sure you can handle that? Maybe the community college would be a better start. My greatest achievement would have been treated as an inconvenience. IPL. Aced the letters carefully into a protective folder and slid them into my bag. This was my real future, not the one that smelled of floor cleaner. Finally, I sat at my desk and took out a single piece of stationery. My hands were perfectly steady as I wrote a short, simple note. I didn't pour out my hurt or my anger. That would be giving them too much. It would invite an argument, a debate, a drama. I was done with all of that. I simply wrote, Mom and Dad, you said your gift was meant to teach me responsibility. I've decided to take your lesson to heart. I am taking responsibility for my own life now. Goodbye. Chloe. I folded the note and placed it in the center of my pillow, where they would be sure to find it. Then, I shouldered my bag, took one last look around the room that had been both my prison and my haven, and quietly walked out. I left the mop and bucket standing by the door like 2 silent guards. As I crept down the stairs, I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. Leo, could you at least take the trash out? I'm busy, he whined. Make Chloe do it when she's done sulking. I slipped on my sneakers, my hand already on the front doorknob. My heart was pounding now, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. This was it. There was no turning back. With my phone in hand, I sent a quick text, Can I come over? I've left home. The reply was instantaneous. Of course, sweetie. I'm on my way to get you. Meet me at the corner. It was from my Aunt Clara, my mother's younger sister, and the one person in my life who had always looked at me and seen me. I opened the front door, stepped out into the cool night air, and closed it behind me with a soft, final click. I didn't look back. The 2 blocks to the corner of my street felt like 100 miles. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car engine, sent a jolt of panic through me. I half expected the front door to fly open, my mother's voice shouting my name, demanding to know where I was going. But there was only silence. The house remained dark and quiet, a monument to the family I no longer belonged to. A pair of headlights rounded the corner, and a familiar blue sedan pulled up to the curb. The passenger door swung open, and Aunt Clara's worried face was illuminated by the soft glow of the dashboard lights. Get in, honey, she said, her voice a soothing balm on my raw nerves. I tossed my duffel bag into the back and slid into the passenger seat, pulling the door shut. As she drove away, I finally allowed myself to look back at the house. It looked smaller, somehow, less intimidating, just a building made of wood and brick. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. Aunt Clara just reached over and squeezed my hand, her touch conveying all the understanding and validation I had been starved of for years. Then, as the familiar streets of my neighborhood disappeared behind us, a sob escaped my lips, then another and another. The dam of numbness finally broke, and years of pent-up frustration, hurt, and loneliness came pouring out in a torrent of tears. I cried for the little girl who had her art projects ignored while her brother's crayon scribbles were framed. I cried for the teenager who had to be the parent to her own parents, always mediating, always placating, always responsible. I cried for the young woman who was handed a mop as a symbol of her worth. Aunt Clara didn't say a word. She just let me cry. She pulled into a quiet, empty parking lot, put the car in park, and waited. When my sobs finally subsided into ragged, shaky breaths, she handed me a box of tissues from the glove compartment. I've been waiting for this day for a long time, she said softly. I looked at her confused. What do you mean? Chloe, I love my sister, but she is blind, she said, her expression a mixture of sadness and frustration. She and Mark decided a long time ago who their children were going to be. Leo was the project, the one who needed endless support and praise to function. You were the success story, the one they could brag about and then ignore because you didn't need them. It was easier for them that way. Hearing her say it out loud, so plainly and simply, was like a key turning in a lock. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. It was real. Someone else had seen it. She gave me a mop, Aunt Clara, I whispered, the absurdity of it hitting me all over again. For graduation. She shook her head, a sad smile on her face. Of course she did. She probably thought she was being profound. She put the car back in gear and started driving again. Well, their free ride is over. You're with me now. Aunt Clara's house was a small, cozy cottage on the other side of town. It smelled of cinnamon and old books. Unlike my parents' house, which was decorated with a sterile, impersonal touch, her home was filled with personality. Colorful paintings, many of which she had done herself, adorned the walls. Quirky, handmade pot. Turi sat on every surface. It felt like a home, not a showroom. She led me to the guest room, a lovely little space with a quilted bedspread and a view of her beautiful garden. You can stay as long as you need, she said, giving my shoulder a gentle squeeze. There are no chores here, Chloe. There are no expectations, just rest. The first 24 hours were a revelation. I slept for 10 hours straight, a deep, dreamless sleep free from the low-grade anxiety that was my constant companion at home. When I woke up, the house was quiet. I found a note from my aunt saying she had gone to run errands and to help myself to anything in the kitchen. I made myself a bowl of cereal and ate it sitting on her back porch, listening to the birds sing. It was the most peaceful meal I had ever had. I spent the day doing absolutely nothing. I read a novel, I wandered through her garden, and I took a long, hot bath. There was no one to ask me if I had emptied the dishwasher, no one to leave a passive-aggressive note about the laundry, no one to expect me to anticipate their needs. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of peace. That evening, Aunt Clara and I ordered Thai food and watched an old movie. I told her everything. I told her about the scholarship, showing her the letters with a trembling hand. Her reaction was everything my parents wouldn't have been. Her eyes filled with tears of genuine pride. "Chloe, this is incredible," she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "A full ride. Oh, I am so proud of you. We have to celebrate." And we did. We celebrated with ice cream and laughter. For the first time, my greatest achievement was treated like it was something worth celebrating. As I went to bed that night, I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. It was the feeling of being seen, the feeling of being free. I had no idea what was happening back at my parents' house, and for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't care. My phone remained silent for the first day. I had turned off my location services and muted my family's contact numbers, but I couldn't resist checking my call log and text messages every few hours, morbidly curious. The initial silence was unnerving. I imagined my parents finding the note, my mother getting angry, my father sighing with weary resignation. They probably thought I was at a friend's house, throwing a teenage tantrum, and that I'd come crawling back as soon as I got hungry. The first text arrived late in the afternoon of day one. It was from my mother. "This isn't funny, Chloe. Come home." An hour later, another one. "Your chores are piling up. I am not going to do them for you." I showed the text to Aunt Clara. She just shook her head. "It's not about you, is it? It's about the work not getting done." She was right. There was no "Are you okay?" No "Are you safe?" Just a summons for the help to return to her post. Day 2 began with a series of missed calls from both my mother and father. The texts grew more demanding, tinged with a rising note of panic. From Mom, "Chloe, I am telling you to answer your phone right now. You are grounded until you're 30. From Dad, "Your mother is very upset. Just tell us where you are." Then came the one that made me laugh out loud, a bitter, humorless sound. It was from Leo. "Mom says I have to drive to campus for a study group, and you're not here to give me a ride. Where are you? This is so typical of you to be selfish." His car, the glorious cherry red sedan, was apparently in the shop for an oil change, a task he couldn't be bothered to manage himself. For 2 years, I had been his backup chauffeur, his personal assistant, his maid. It had never occurred to him that my time and energy were finite resources. To him, I was just a convenience, and now that convenience was gone. Aunt Clara and I spent the day planning. We opened a new bank account in my name only and transferred my savings. We made a list of everything I would need for my dorm room. We looked up bus routes from her town to the university. With every practical step we took, I felt more grounded, more in control of my own destiny. I was building a new life, brick by brick, while the old one crumbled in the distance. The evening of day 2 brought a frantic voicemail from my father. "Chloe, please just call us. We're getting worried. The house is a mess. Your mother, she tried to do the laundry, and she said one of your sweaters turned pink. Leo is complaining there's no food in the house." His voice was strained, not with worry for my well-being, but with the sheer inconvenience of it all. They hadn't realized how much invisible work I did, how I was the silent engine that kept the entire household running smoothly. I cooked, I cleaned, I did the grocery planning, I managed appointments. I was the family's external hard drive, and they had just discovered they couldn't access the files. On the morning of day 3, the dam of their anger and denial fina. Ellie broke and the flood of panic began. They must have realized I wasn't at a friend's house. They must have realized this was different. A text from Mom, early in the morning, "Please, Chloe, just let us know you are safe. We're sorry." It was the first time the word sorry had been used. But it felt hollow, a tactic rather than a genuine emotion. Aunt Clara looked at me over her mug of coffee. "They're realizing they can't function without you," she said. "Now the real performance begins." As if on cue, my phone began to ring. The caller ID showed my mother's name. I stared at it, my heart starting to pound again. "You don't have to answer it," Aunt Clara said gently. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I think I do." I took a deep breath, swiped to answer, and put the phone on speaker. "Chloe," my mother's voice was thick with unshed tears, choked and desperate. "Oh, Chloe, thank goodness. Please come home. The house is a disaster. Your father and we can't." She broke off with a sob. "Please, honey, we didn't mean it. It was a stupid joke. We miss you. Please come home." The words from the Reddit title I would one day write echoed in my ears. "Please come home. We didn't mean it." I listened to her cry, and I felt a strange sense of detachment. The little girl inside me who would have done anything to stop her mother's tears was gone. In her place was a young woman who recognized the sound of desperation, not love. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did. "No," I said, my voice calm and clear. "I won't be coming home." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, broken only by my mother's ragged breathing. It was as if the word "no" was a foreign concept she had never encountered from me before. What do you mean, you're not coming home?" she stammered. "Chloe, this has gone on long enough. This is your family." "I know," I replied, my voice gaining strength. Aunt Clara gave me an encouraging nod. "But I will not be returning to the way things were. However," I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in, "I am willing to talk." I could hear my father's voice in the background, a muffled, "What is she saying?" My mother's tone shifted from desperation to confusion. "Talk? We can talk here. Just come home and we can talk this all out." "No," I said again firmly. "We will not be talking at the house. We will meet somewhere neutral. Tomorrow afternoon, at the coffee shop on Main Street, just you and Dad. Leo is not to be there." This new set of conditions, this sudden reversal of our lifelong dynamic, clearly threw them for a loop. There was more muffled whispering before my father took the phone. "Chloe," he said, his voice attempting a tone of patriarchal authority that no longer had any effect on me. "This is ridiculous. You're our daughter. You live under our roof." "Not anymore, Dad," I said quietly. "The coffee shop, tomorrow at 2. If you want to see me and understand why this happened, you'll be there. If not, then there's nothing more to say." I didn't wait for a reply. I ended the call. My hand was trembling slightly, but I felt a surge of empowerment. For the first time in my life, I had set the terms. The next day, I dressed with care. I didn't want to look like a rebellious teenager or a victim. I chose a simple pair of dark jeans and a crisp blue blouse. I wanted to look like what I was, a young adult who was calm, serious, and in control. Aunt Clara drove me to the coffee shop, giving my hand a final squeeze before I got out. "Remember," she said, "you hold all the cards. Just tell them your truth." I saw them through the window before I even went inside. They were sitting at a small table in the corner, looking lost and out of place. My father was staring blankly into a cup of coffee, and my mother was nervously shredding a napkin into a pile of white confetti. They both looked tired, their faces etched with lines of stress that I had never noticed before. The chaos of the last 3 days had clearly taken its toll. I pushed open the door and walked toward them. Their heads snapped up, and a look of profound relief washed over my mother's face. She started to stand, her arms half open as if to hug me. I held up a hand, a small, simple gesture that stopped her in her tracks. "Please sit," I said, my voice even. I sat down opposite them, placing my purse on the empty chair beside me. "Chloe, we were so worried," my mother began, her eyes welling up again. "Were you worried about me, or were you worried about who was going to make dinner?" I asked, not unkindly, but with a directness that stunned them into silence. I took a deep breath. This was it. No more hiding, no more swallowing my feelings to keep the peace. "I am not here to argue," I began, looking from my mother's tear-streaked face to my father's bewildered one. "I am here to tell you why I left. I left because of the mop. But it was never just about the mop. The mop was Jew. Sent the final word in a story you have been writing for my entire life." And then I told them. I calmly, and without raising my voice, recounted a lifetime of slights. I talked about Leo's grand birthday party and his new car, and my sad little takeout dinner. I talked about how his C+s were celebrated with praise, while my straight-A report cards were met with indifference. I reminded them of the Washington, D.C. trip I missed because I had to do Leo's project for him. I spoke of the endless chores, the constant expectation that I would be the responsible one, the mature one, the one who didn't need anything. "You didn't raise 2 children," I said, my voice thick with emotion but still steady. "You raised a son and you raised his assistant. You didn't see me, Chloe, the person. You saw a tool, someone to support Leo, to clean up after him, to make his life easier. And you punished me for my own competence. Every time I succeeded at something, you just added another responsibility to my plate, while every time Leo struggled, you rewarded him with more help, more attention, more things." My mother just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not true. We love you. We just thought you were so capable. You never needed us the way Leo did." "Everyone needs to be needed," I said softly. "Everyone needs to be seen. My strength should not have been my burden to carry alone." My father, who had been silent throughout my entire speech, finally spoke. He cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses in that way he always did when he felt uncomfortable. "We didn't realize, Chloe," he said, his voice strained. "We just fell into a pattern. We never meant to hurt you." "But you did hurt me," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Intent doesn't change the outcome. For years, you made me feel invisible. My graduation gift wasn't a celebration of my hard work, it was my job description." My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling. "We can fix this," she pleaded. "We'll get you a car, we'll throw you a real party, whatever you want. Just please come back home." It was the same pattern, trying to solve a deep emotional wound with a material object. They still didn't understand. It wasn't about the car, it was about the disparity. It wasn't about the party. It was about the lack of genuine pride. "It's too late for that," I said gently, pulling my hand away. I reached into my purse and took out the crisp, white envelope I had been guarding for months. I slid it across the table. My father picked it up, his brow furrowed in confusion. He opened the flap and pulled out the letter. My mother leaned in to read over his shoulder. I watched as their eyes scanned the first few lines. I saw the exact moment they understood. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, and a small, shocked gasp escaped her lips. My father read the letter again, as if the words might change. His face went pale. "Valedictorian," he whispered, looking up at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You were the valedictorian of your class." I just nodded. They had attended my graduation, of course, but had clearly paid little attention to the ceremony, more concerned with getting home to order the pizza. "And this university," my father continued, his voice trailing off, "this is one of the best schools in the country." He looked down at the second letter that had been tucked inside, the one detailing the financial award. His eyes widened. "A full scholarship? They're paying for everything." "Yes," I said quietly. "Tuition, room, and board. The works." They said my application was one of the strongest they had ever seen. The air in the coffee shop seemed to crackle with the unspoken truth. Their entire narrative of me, Chloe, the simple, reliable domestic daughter who would probably go to community college and live at home forever, had just been blown to pieces. They were staring at a stranger, a highly accomplished young woman who had a secret life they knew nothing about. Why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked, her voice a fragile whisper. And for the first time, a flicker of real anger ignited within me. "Why?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "Why would I? So you could tell me it was too far away, so you could worry about who would do the laundry, so you could diminish my single greatest achievement into an inconvenience for the family. I kept it a secret because I knew you wouldn't celebrate it. You would complicate it. I needed one thing in my life that was just for me, one thing that you couldn't touch." The truth of my words hung between us, heavy and undeniable. They had no defense. They stared at the letters on the table, the proof of a daughter they had never bothered to know. The image of me being handed a mop while I held a full scholarship to a top university in my back pocket was a cognitive dissonance they couldn't resolve. My father, the accountant, the practical man, seemed most stunned by the scholarship. He understood the monetary value of what I had accomplished on my own. My mother, however, seemed shattered by the secret itself, by the chasm of mistrust it represented. "So, what does this mean?" my father finally asked, looking utterly defeated. "What are you going to do?" "It means I'm leaving in August," I said, my voice regaining its calm. "It means I'm going to college 5 states away. It means I'm taking responsibility for my own life, just like you told me to. And it means I am not coming home." The aftermath of our meeting at the coffee shop was not explosive. There was no more yelling, no dramatic pleading. My revelation had deflated them completely, leaving them in a state of quiet, stunned remorse. They walked me to my aunt's car in silence, the scholarship letter still clutched in my father's hand like a verdict. As I got in, my mother looked at me, her eyes filled with a new, painful understanding. "We messed up, Chloe," she whispered. "We really messed up." It was the most honest thing she had said to me in years. I didn't move back home. I stayed with Aunt Clara for the entire summer, and it was the most transformative period of my life. With her help, I finally got my driver's license, something my parents had always been too busy to help me with. Aunt Clara was the one who sat patiently in the passenger seat while I practiced, who took me for the road test, and who cheered when I passed. My relationship with my parents shifted into something tentative and strange. They would call, and our conversations were stilted and awkward. They asked questions about my college plans, about the courses I was choosing, listening with a new, focused attention. They were trying to get to know the daughter they had overlooked for 18 years. It was a start, but I kept a careful distance, refusing to let them slip back into old patterns. The burden of fixing our relationship was on them, and I was no longer willing to do the heavy lifting. Leo reached out once with a clumsy text message that read, "Mom told me about your school. That's cool, I guess. Sorry about the mop thing. I knew it was the best apology he was capable of, and I accepted it for what it was, but I also knew that our relationship, like the one with my parents, would never be the same. The pedestal they had placed him on had been kicked out from under him, and he was struggling to find his footing." The summer flew by in a blur of preparation and newfound independence. Aunt Clara and I went shopping for dorm supplies, and for the first time, I was able to pick things out that I liked without having to justify the cost or the style. We weren't just buying bedding and desk lamps, we were building the scaffolding for my new life. The day I left for college was bright and clear. Aunt Clara drove me, her little blue sedan packed to the brim with my belongings. When we pulled away from her curb, I felt a pang of sadness at leaving her, the only person who had ever been my unconditional champion. But it was overshadowed by a thrilling wave of excitement for what lay ahead. As we crossed the state line, my phone rang. It was my parents calling together. I put them on speaker. "We just wanted to wish you luck, honey," my father said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're so proud of you, Chloe," my mother added, and this time I knew she meant it. "We packed you a little something. It's in your main suitcase. It's not a mop, I promise." I smiled. "Thank you, I'll call you when I get settled." When I finally arrived at my dorm, I found the little something they had packed. It was a framed photo, but it wasn't a family portrait. It was the photo from my valedictorian speech, a picture the school had sent them. In it, I am standing at a podium, looking out at the crowd with a confident smile on my face. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, it said, "Our daughter, Chloe, the one we are so proud to know." Later that evening, after Aunt Clara had tearfully hugged me goodbye, I stood alone in the center of my new room. It was small and plain, with concrete walls and standard-issue furniture. It was a blank slate. It was all mine. For the first time, my future felt like an open road, not a narrow, predetermined path. I had taken the mop and the lecture, and I had used them not to clean their floors, but to sweep away the life that had been holding me back. I was finally, truly, responsible for myself, and I had never felt so free. What should I do now? Should I try to forgive my parents completely, or are some things better left in the past? The road ahead is long, and I'm the only one driving.